Hi, everyone. I hope you're back from your breaks. And we're going to go ahead with the next two short presentations. The first one for this session is going to be Malene Friis Hansen of the Longtail Macaque Project. And she's going to talk about field research and macaque welfare. And we can start that up now.
I'm Malene Friis Hansen, and I am a postdoc at the University of Copenhagen and a research affiliate at Oxford Brookes. I am also the co-vice chair of the section for human-primate interactions under the IUCN Primate Specialist Group. Today, I'll be talking about field research and macaque welfare, especially how field and research can have implications for and enhance macaque welfare. First, I want to thank the Asia for Animals Macaque Coalition for inviting me here. This is a very exciting workshop and an interesting lineup, and I'm just looking forward to learning a lot more and to talking to all of you. When I started looking into started thinking about how field research can have implications for macaque welfare, well, I guess I did a long time ago, but for this talk specifically, I got pretty overwhelmed because there's so much to discuss and so much to talk about that it's very difficult to fit it into a short presentation. So I will briefly go over it, and then I'm very excited that we can discuss it more in the following workshop, because I think there is a lot that we need to talk about, and there's a lot more that I could fit into this presentation. I will focus a bit on our project that we've just started, and then I will talk a bit about how other areas of research can also enhance macaque welfare. We just started a new initiative, an international collaboration, which is the Longtail Macaque Project. We focus on conducting research and communicating between the collaborators to figure out what the current status of the longtail macaque is, to figure out trade volumes, to figure out distribution, to figure out population density across Southeast Asia, and to also look into the human-macaque interactions and the human perceptions of longtail macaques. It's a conservation project and a protection project. We do hope that this will be a long-term project that will find results that can help long-term conservation and long-term protection of the longtail macaque, which can also then enhance welfare. We intend to communicate our findings broadly to policymakers, both internationally, nationally, locally. And this is how we hope to have an effect. Now, we just launched our new website, which you can find here, and you can also find us on Twitter and on Facebook if you want to know more. We are always looking for new collaborators, so do get in contact if you're interested. This, as I said, is collaboration, and I'm not the only one coordinating it. We are several people. Professor Augustine Fuentes from Princeton University, Associate Professor Elodie Briefer from the University of Copenhagen, and Associate Professor Michael D. Gummert from Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. We are funded by Animal Protection Denmark, Rewild Foundation, and also we are a project under the Section for Human-Primate Interactions. Our project seeks to combine conservation and welfare, as I just talked about, but that's also been my path in working with macaques during the past many years. I started working in zoos with captive macaques, and then moved on to working rescue centers with husbandry in captivity, but also with reintroductions. And I then transitioned into working in research on wild populations. And during my path through all of this, I found that everything is interconnected. So especially for macaques, we conservation and welfare is connected, and research and practice is connected. So to have an effect, I think we need to combine all of it, and I think we need to work together. There are many causes for macaque welfare problems, and I'll only mention a few, but in general, there seems to be a perception of overabundance of many macaque species. And because people feel that there are so many of them, there's no need to conserve or protect them. There's also a continuous discourse surrounding the negative human-macaque interactions, both between people, but also especially in media and in governments. There's a large focus on the negative human-macaque interactions instead of all the positive influences macaques can have on humans and humans can have on macaques. There's also a great monetary value in many macaque species. They're used as pets, they're used in photo props, they're used as meat, and they're also used in biomedical research. And in general, as you can see, I've put up the words here, many macaque species are seen as pests and as conflict species. So we're looking into perceptions of some species that lead to negative welfare or a lack of welfare. Now, when I talk about welfare, we can look into welfare problems both in and ex situ. So there can be issues with welfare in captivity, for example, when they're kept as pets. But there can also be issues in the wild when they're free ranging, for example, when they're free ranging in anthropogenic areas and they're fed, provisioned, which can lead to alopecia, overweight, many obesity, many different problems, and also lead to other health problems, and for example, also disease transmission, which can also reduce the welfare. There's also a problem with the population control methods often employed by, for example, government agencies or other agencies, which might have a negative welfare effect if they're not well studied. So what I propose, or what I see and what many have conducted, is that if you look into different areas of research, you might have a positive impact on welfare. So from our perspective, what we're looking into now to increase the welfare of macaques is 3 different areas of research. Now, the first one is to mitigate the perception of overabundance. And we want to do that through population census surveys. So in the field, we're doing distance sampling. Some are working with thermal imaging, using drones. Some are using camera traps. And you can use different methods to do a population census. Now, knowing the population size and the distribution and providing this information to policymakers, both internationally, nationally, and locally, can help the macaque species in question receive protection. So in some countries, many macaque species are not protected, and in others they are. But first and foremost, if we want to seek protection, we need to know more about how many are actually left, where are they distributed, what's going on, and then provide this information to, for example, CITES and the IUCN, and to national policymakers. Now, if they are protected, then we can provide this information to say that the protection should be enforced, and that local laws should be enforced if we want to continue to have the species in the wild. And enforcement is also often based on the listing on CITES or in IUCN, on the IUCN Red List. So it is critical that we know the population size and the distribution of the different species to receive this protection of them and law enforcement when they're, for example, illegally harvested, or if people are encroaching on their habitats. Another area that we are looking into is the negative interactions between people and macaques. And to investigate this, we combine approaches. We've both looked at and use quantitative behavioral observations of macaques to know more about their behavior with people. But we also, and more specifically, use qualitative ethnographic research to know more about human perceptions, human intentions, human attitudes, and human behavior towards the macaques. So in terms of to know more about these negative interactions and in hopes to mitigate them, we move our focus more to the human populations. And we do this to both listen more to the local people, but also because often humans might be the cause of the issues, and we need to figure out how we can then mitigate the problem and need to listen to the people to find out what they think could be a solution. And one reason to use ethnography, or well, the main reason, and is to also then learn about the local culture, the local behavior, and the local religion, and everything that has an effect on how people react and interact with macaques. And then we can, after knowing this, we can create specific mitigation techniques that can, if it works, which we hope, then can increase macaque welfare. I think, increase macaque welfare. We also want to look into trade, and we want to do investigations in the wild. And right now we have teams looking at using thermal imaging to see when macaques are harvested in the wild. You can also use camera traps to figure out if there's illegal hunting going on of macaques. But it is very important that if you conduct anything that leads to images or has any effect on local people, you will always need local acceptance. And that is, again, an important ethical consideration when doing all of this research, is that we don't want to initiate anything without having local accept and local knowledge regarding what we are conducting. We can also use market surveys to figure out more about the trade, and of course online trade research. Now, this is not the field research, but it's also research that can help increase macaque welfare. And when we can combine all of the findings that we have, all the results, then we can predict the population viability. So looking at the harvest rate and the current population size, we can see if the populations are viable, and we can again then contact policymakers to tell them our findings and to then hopefully increase the protection of the species in question if they need this protection. Now, raising awareness to change behavior and perceptions is crucial when you work with many macaque species. Back in 1989, Richard et al. Presented this paper that discussed the many macaque species and say that some are wheat species and some are not. And the wheat species are the ones that are synanthropes, the ones that are able to survive in anthropogenic landscapes. But a term as wheat species can be misinterpreted, misunderstood. And when people see macaque species as pests, as wheat species, they have a tendency to treat it as such. And what do people do when they see wheat? They remove it. So basically, we need to change the perceptions of macaques, but we can only do this if we know more about, as I said, the local culture and the reasons why people have this perception. So again, we need to use ethnographic research and contact people out in the local communities to know their perceptions and to understand them. And also to be able to present our findings in the right way if we want to do any awareness raising. In general, macaques are amazing, and this is what we want people to understand. Now, the long-term macaque project, we're focused on long-term solutions that are science-based, and that's why we're focused on research. And we believe that research can lead to increased protection and can lead to increased welfare. We've discussed this for the long-tail macaque in our recent publication, which you can find online. It's from 2021. We want to communicate all the findings that we find to create the awareness, to change policies, and to conserve macaque species. When we have all of this data and when we know more about perceptions, we might also be able to communicate our findings to the companies that are using macaques, for example, in biomedical research, which can hopefully also reduce the harvest from the wild and increase welfare in captivity. And we want to do all of this in a culturally appropriate way. Now, we believe that more research leads to better welfare, and I've kind of briefly covered density and distribution and coexistence, harvest rates, and awareness raising within research to increase macaque welfare. But there's of course also the use of behavior in the wild and the use of research in reintroductions, which I'll just briefly discuss before I finish my presentation. Now, when you look at or observe behavior in the wild, you will learn more about activity budgets, movement behavior, social structure, and, for example, flight direction. Like, all of these behaviors are crucial to be able to enhance welfare in captivity. So for us to create the best conditions for macaques in captivity, this is knowledge that we need to have. I do remember a long time ago when my former supervisor, the late Corey Wade, figured out that long-tail macaques have a vertical flight direction. And this, I know now that a lot of people use this, and this was very crucial in terms of then knowing that for long-tail macaques, you don't need to have a wide captive space, but the height is more important because they need to be able to flee each other, for example, when you do socializations. So there's a lot that we can learn by studies in the wild. Now, in terms of reintroductions and translocations, we need to do a lot of field research. We need to know if the release site is suitable, and that will be through research into local attitudes, if they are pro-release. And if not, then we need to work on finding out how we can release the animals with the local acceptance. So that is working with local communities. And we also need to know the species' historical and current presence through field research. We need to know the threats, and we need to know if the habitat is suitable. And that is all through field research. Then we also need to, if we do releases of macaque species, we need to follow them and monitor them post-release to see if the release is effective, to see if they are thriving in their new habitat, and to see if also the ecosystem and the local communities are thriving with the reintroduced macaques. Now, you can of course find the guidelines for reintroductions online, which I highly recommend everyone to read. This was all I had time to talk about now, so I'm excited that we will get to discuss more in the workshop. This was a very brief overview of how research can hopefully enhance welfare, and I hope you understood, and if not, then my apologies. But again, we can discuss it more in the following workshop, and I want to thank you all for listening, and again, thank you to the AfA for Animals Macaque Coalition for inviting me. Thank you.
Fantastic. That was really nice. Again, a lot of common themes, you know, about the way macaques are perceived, and about the way like headlines and language is framed. It's all very important. And it's very clear that if you're going to really seriously work on macaque welfare, you need a lot of background information, and this research is absolutely essential to be able to do it well. I'm now going to move you over to Harold Browning, who